Hi everyone, I'm Dayanji and I'm joined today by my co-host Linda de Gonzalez, oops, here on this side, and Dr. Pamela Stoodley, who is also a guest on our previous episode of Into the Ether. Hold on, I think I should do this. Oops, where did Linda go?
No, 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 no. You don't push the nuke button.
No, no, it wasn't like that before. Okay, avert
No.
your Geralds. There we go. There, I was aiming for that, everyone.
Oh,
I
that's
just want to say
hilarious.
hi to people first who are here. Hi, Mangled Unicorn Jacqueline. Hi, Sonia. Hi, Janet. So, during our previous episode, we talked about shadow work, the what other people think of as scary. And I hope a lot of people who watched that first episode really understood what it is, what shadow is, and what shadow work is. And if you've missed that episode, it's on our channel. It's on Linda de Gonzalez's channel and my channel, so please check that out. And this is part two. So we are going to continue. So we talked about what shadow work is, and what it isn't, and also what shadows are. So we also talked about how it's different from trauma. But now we will talk about what happens when we don't heal our shadows? I know there's stuff. So how about we start with that? What happens when we don't heal our shadows?
Um, One of the things that I wanted to just quickly mention before we go to the what would happen, um, let's say why. Why would someone choose not to do that? And I was thinking of this analogy, you know, and this is a very, very weird analogy. So it's just a very loose analogy. It may not make sense, but you'll see what I mean. When we walk and we've got our set of eyes right in front of our face, every day since the time we were born and could recognize a mirror, we looked at our reflection. We can see from the top of our head right to the top of our to the bottom of our feet. We look at this version of us, and we go in our everyday lives knowing about this. We pay attention to how we look. How does our hair look? What will people think of us when we look like this? Um, why did we get a spot on our face? Maybe it's something that happened that I put on my face, and we go fixing it. And how we dress, what do we look like without our clothes? What do we need to fix? What do we need to tuck? We went through an experience, like me, for example. I went through childbirth, 2 cesareans. How did my body change? I can see all of that. And so I want to make changes. Imagine for one day, due to some wish of yours, you manage to take these eyes and put it on the back of your head.
Mhm.
Suddenly, you have a view of a very different world, a view that existed, but you could never see it. People can see it because they can see the back of you, but you have never been able to see it. You're able to see what the back of your head looks like, your back looks like, everything right down to your heels. What do they look like? And then suddenly at 12 o'clock, like Cinderella, the pumpkin comes back, your eyes come back into your socket. Now it's the next day and you go about your day. But you can't forget that version that you saw. You never can unsee that. And you always now think about, this is me that I consciously see, but how's that doing that I had a little glimpse of, you know? Is everything okay? Should I ask someone? Should I get someone to make sure? Because you now have seen and been exposed to a world that existed that you never knew but was there in the shadows. So, talking about shadows at a subconscious level is like that. We go about a long, long period of our lives, some of us longer than most, where we function only from a conscious level. day in and day out, we have the same patterns. We are on autopilot. We wake up, we brush our teeth, we get into the grind, we go to work, we come back. Some of us work from home, some of us have no work, no judgment, but we go about a pattern in life because we are creature of habit. We are all creatures of habit. And so whenever we're met with a challenge, oftentimes the default way of doing things is questioning, why did this challenge fall in my lap? What went wrong? How did that happen? And how can I fix it? Not realizing that every challenge that comes to us is telling us, you need to look inside why this is a challenge for you and is not a challenge for someone else, for example. But we miss those opportunities until, more often than not, something major happens, which is when we then go inwards and go, why did that happen to me? How can I change from this from within so that something like this doesn't keep repeating itself? So why we do shadow work and what happens if we don't do shadow work? In the real world, from a psychological perspective, what I see in clinics as my clients, it manifests as, I'm stuck. I attract the same people for my relationships. No matter how much I try to change, the same thing keeps happening to me. I'm trying to make changes to my health, but I don't see any improvement. This is the scientific world of seeing why we don't pay attention to shadow work or why we don't change something about our shadows. That's how we see it in the scientific community. That's how we receive it from the outwards. And so when we tell our patients, reframe, go do some inner work or inner child work or do some shadow work, that in itself is a way of trying to tell people this thing that you feel, the stuckness that we call it, it's to get you out of it. And this pattern that you see, which is a subconscious pattern, it's just be aware of it, not stop it, but be aware of it so you can take control of it and not succumb to it. So in a nutshell, I just blended that. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's a
that makes
wonderful
sense.
image. It's a wonderful image. And one of our chatters put in, a response. And I realized that Diane, did we want to show the comments? I forgot to put them up.
Oh, yeah.
Voila. So Janet says, this is about what happens to shadows when we don't deal with them. She says they get bigger or stronger. What do you have to say about that, Pam?
I think in a way of talking about shadows, it's not, I'm not able to see the screen for some reason. Give me a second. As long as you can see me, I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, we can see you.
Yeah, we see you and we hear you.
Yeah. The shadows themselves don't get bigger or stronger, but the intensity of it does. So
Yeah.
it's like it's a subconscious pattern. It tries to show it to you once because of a challenge you're faced with. It brings to the surface what within you capability that needs to be addressed in order to deal with that. If you ignore it, it comes back again. But this time, what happens is it's a bit of a louder cry. The intensity, the volume of it increases. So I'm going to go with the comment of it being stronger as being the intensity, bigger, not necessarily size wise, but I would definitely say that the manifestation of ignoring one's shadow becomes bigger. Like you keep ignoring it and ignoring it and ignoring it, your challenges seem bigger and bigger, and the outcome of that seems bigger and bigger. So yeah.
It's interesting to me how that echoes what we often say about listening to our spiritual, sorry, she doesn't listening to our parents. No, about listening to our intuition and our guides. You know, our inner our inner wisdom, really.
Yeah.
Because well, I mean, I make a joke of it. You know, spirit will knock once and you can ignore it, and then it'll knock again louder and you can keep ignoring it, but eventually you will be hit with the bonk of enlightenment. And this is when you absolutely not, and it can be, and it will undoubtedly be painful one way
Yes.
or another.
It's a part of
So for Diane too, in terms of when someone comes to both Diane and Linda, when someone comes, like I would say that when people come to me as a therapist, I can, or as a doctor or as a counselor, I can see the manifestations of that. How
Mhm.
is that? How does that look like to you in your world when people come and you know that they either have not done the shadow work because they don't know about it, or they have ignored the call and the cry of the shadow work needs to be done, you know? So,
Yeah, for me, it's similar. Like we just see manifestations in the energy body, mostly in the
mm,
chakras. So they have
right.
unbalanced chakras or blocked chakras. And then when we look into it, I think that's part of being aware of it or getting to know why something is happening. We like I'm a healer, I'm an energy healer, and I do energy clearings. And the one of the requirements for us to clear energy is for the person to know the background of an event that happened maybe in their past lifetime or in this lifetime. And it kind of ties into what you were saying earlier, because to me it feels like it sounds like self-awareness is very important in getting to know your shadows. So is it like the first step to healing? Or
Yes.
oh,
um, I think most people underestimate awareness to a point where it's now become this buzzword. You look at social media, everybody, oh, let's be mindful, do this mindfully. Um, I would say being mindful and being aware are used synonymously, but they are two separate things. Because if my child is walking and he's not paying attention to something, then I would say just be mindful. Watch your step. So he watches a step and then he can go about his day. Just be mindful about what you're doing so that you're doing it with intention. Being aware takes you from slipping into autopilot because I don't need to pay attention, or I mean, I don't need to be aware of the fact that I'm brushing my teeth. I just do it out of habit. I just go in, go to the toilet. I don't even think. However, think about it. If you have a sore tooth, now suddenly you're aware because something is bringing and calling to your attention. You go slowly over a gum that's inflamed. You do it slowly on that side so as to not hurt you. You now bring your awareness to it because there's something that's calling your awareness to do it, um, with without being too in an autopilot mode, right? But that is the start of it, because having to make any change, if you're not aware that you need to make a change, then how will the change happen? Unless, like Linda said, circumstances cause a change that's out of your control. And most of us, if not all of us, don't want to be in that state where nature takes its course and then we're having to accommodate around it. So, yeah.
So it sounds to me like it's the first step is of course self-awareness, and then from there the points of pressure, the points that hurt, the parts of
Yeah.
you that scream or yell, the parts of you that leave an interaction going, what 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 just happened here? The parts of you, or after you've Well, or not maybe little things, but things in your life that you're not comfortable with, that are not happy, not smooth, not easy, not peaceful. I guess the next step would be awareness of those, and then checking if there's a pattern. Like, are there
Yes.
lots of places in your life where you feel you're not heard? Are there lots of places in your life where you feel that your wishes are ignored, your preferences are ignored? Are there lots of places in your life where you're the one doing for others and nobody's doing for you?
I love that you're using the word parts because Gerald just or Taro Stash just put in a comment. Personally, I struggle with the label shadow work. I feel like it's all work to being as whole as possible.
Yeah.
So I
That's why
feel
I call it just reframing
Mhm.
or rewiring. In saying in saying reframing or rewiring, we are, yes, on a physiological level, we're talking about the neuronal neuronal network. However, what is being reframed is the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm looking at is not, we've grown up with these concepts of strengths and weaknesses. Well, who tags them as weaknesses? Someone for whom that particular trait didn't work in their favor becomes a weakness. But to somebody else, that weakness is a strength. So it's not some label. And I am very averse to any labels, whether it's a diagnosis, even, because yes, a diagnosis gives you an understanding of what it is happening with you, but it doesn't solve anything.
No.
It's good to know, okay, I have a label, I've got a diagnosis. Okay, now what? You still need to do the work. If you've been diagnosed as being diabetic, great, you're diabetic. So what? You still need to make your lifestyle changes. You still need to do the things that you need to do so that you can now live knowing and having this awareness that you have to change the way you used to live to be able to live a qualitative life. The label is just to give you an understanding and to pacify the ego on some level. I'm not talking about health diagnosis, but many of the psychological aspects that we talk about, it's our ego that needs to know what's happening with me. I need answers. I need to understand. I need to know why this is happening. But if we take the focus away from why this happened to me, rather than why does this keep happening? And then that's when, as Linda said, you get to the bottom of recognizing the pattern. It's not hard to recognize the pattern, because here's the secret thing, right? Everybody recognizes a pattern if it's outside of us. The only reason we don't recognize a pattern that's inside of us is because we're in denial of the pattern.
Yes.
We justify that pattern. That cracked
I'm
Linda
sure.
up.
I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm
No, no.
laughing in recognition. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
laughing that yes, this is true. You know, this is a delighted recognition laugh. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why when people often come to me and they go, I don't one of my rules as a life coach even is to never give answers to people. One is because my answer may not be the answer, but also because if I come up with an insight, it's not your insight. So, therefore, if I give you instructions, it's going to be just as giving you a prescription. You may or may not take it, it may or may not change things for you. But when you come up with an insight for yourself, you now think, I came up with it, so I can do it because it'll work for me, because it came from me. So that's why we make people understand and come up with solutions for themselves. So when people come to me and they go, I can't recognize my pattern, an exercise I often try with them and I say, and this works, which we can talk about in how to go about it, but is when you journal something, and you look at it as if you're reading someone else's journal, suddenly you have great insights, because we're very good at giving advice to people if they have a problem.
Mhm.
As long as my problem is not, if my problem were someone else's problem and someone came to me with advice, I would give them advice. I can't just come up with an advice that works for me. So pattern recognition is the same thing. If it helps, people can always go, I'm going through all of this. Or you record your, when you're feeling funny someday, or you're feeling very creative, change your voice, change your tone, speak funny, and speak your problem into a recorder. And then come at it the next day and listen as if it's somebody else. You'll recognize the pattern, because you'll think you're listening to somebody else's podcast, and you'll be like, anybody can see what that pattern is. So these are different ways of going about it. But pattern recognition is there. It's just, we don't want to recognize it on many levels. This can be explained from an ego perspective. This can be explained from a denial perspective, because no, this can't happen to me. It happens to other people. It can't happen to me. And also this fear of, if I recognize it, I need to do something about it. And if I do something about it, that means I'm going to be uncomfortable. And I don't like being uncomfortable, because I'm comfortable how I am, and keep complaining about it. So there's a lot that goes into the work that,
Right.
that
Again,
Gerald doesn't like.
I'm laughing. I'm smiling because it feels very familiar. Just hearing all of that.
To all of us.
We
Yeah.
see it all
Yeah.
the time, and sometimes we do them ourselves.
Mhm.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Having the accurate words. And prior to the show, I was talking to another person once, and I said, mindset reframing, a lot of it comes from language. And Linda, we were talking about a particular term that gets used, right? How we talk to ourselves, how we talk to other people, the language we adopt, it frames how we think. And so a lot of times we tell people, change the way you talk, because the way you talk affects the way you think. If people have this inner critic voice about, oh, I'm such a dud, I'm such a klutz, I always keep doing this, oh, look at me, then you keep thinking about that. And then that becomes a challenge for you from wanting to make changes, because that's how you believe things about yourself. So language, words are such a crucial tool in how we self-communicate, rather than even communicate with other people. But self-communication is such a huge thing. And I'm not even going to go on a non-verbal kind of level of communication with our bodies, because that's just lost. People have kind of, some of us are in tune with it, but most people out there have lost that sense of communication, non-verbal communication with themselves, which is why shadow work or pattern recognition is even more important. I do agree with Gerald, not on the work bit, but on the shadow bit, because connotation of darkness that we talked in the previous episode.
Mhm.
Shadow is dark, dark is evil, evil is bad, stay away from. These are words that people come up with and make associations, which then, kind of screws with our mind, because
Mhm.
we have these stereotypical definitions, and definitions make or break your belief. People think, I can change the definition, but I won't change my belief, because if I change my belief, it changes who I am, which isn't true. We've all changed our beliefs from the time we were 6-year-olds to who we are now. It's just happened automatically. But the ones that we hold on to for dear life are the ones that need to be paid attention to, actually.
Wow. It's true.
This is another comment from Janet Daisy, who also finds the word shadow. It's
Exactly.
kind of dark when you call it shadow. So you can call it parts, or what other names can we call our shadow?
If if people want to give it a very logical term, they can call it patterns. because they are
Oh,
subconscious patterns,
yeah.
right? I personally love the dark because if I were to paint a starry night, I can't do it in a bright sky. I love the dark. I can't. I love seeing the stars, and the only reason I can appreciate the stars is because the sky is dark. I love dark clothes because it brings a good contrast to whatever other kind of jewelry I'd be wearing. For me, I guess I think I don't go with the norm and the definition of how people, but I can see how people are averse to anything that comes under that family of shadow, darkness, or anything. So that's why we have languages, that's why we have synonyms. Use what works so that
Mm-hmm.
we take that first level of excuse out of the way. If the word isn't fit, if the word isn't vibing with you,
Mm-hmm.
find a word that does. And then you can get over that first hurdle that the word is causing a problem. Right. Find a word that does. Let's move on. What's the next step? Because we are very good at finding excuses to not want to do something that'll change us and make us uncomfortable. And if that means even sticking on to a word because the word is not great, then we'll stick to the word. So
Yeah.
let's call it patterns. Let's call it inner work. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
like the word work, you can be like, I need to do some kind of inner child exercises. Exercises don't fit for you. You can pick up the thesaurus and pick any word that you fancy. But um, the reason why people call it the shadow work is mainly because it's a Jungian thing. Carl
Yeah.
Jung came up with these terminologies, and I don't think he came at it from a perspective of, again, light, evil and good. He drew abstractly from the fact that we are beings of light. If we stood in the light, we cast our shadow. More often than not, like from my analogy of the eyes at the back, we don't look at our shadows. We don't pay attention to them. We just walk. Sometimes our shadows get elongated, sometimes they get shrunk, sometimes they're in front of us, sometimes they're behind us, but we never really pay attention to it. So that's why the word shadow. That's it.
There's another comment is that
Mhm.
I find really interesting. Janet says,
Yeah. So that comes to the how do we go about it? And that's quite interesting because now that you're aware and you recognize there is a pattern, there are two ways you can go about it. One is if you want to invest your time and effort into going to understand the root cause of it. A lot of people do. A lot of people, while they don't go with the intent of finding out the why this happened, as in the root cause, um, because sometimes some people say an event that happened to them caused them grief at such a point they want to suppress it, and if they suppress it they don't want to relive that event, and if they don't want to relive that event they'll never find out the root cause of it because their subconscious is protecting them you know and so maybe if they're very driven to find it they may undergo hypnosis or find out about the root cause that way. But more often than not, in my experience and in my clients experience, when you're willing to do the work to find out what exactly is this pattern, generally, like say for example through meditation, the root cause does come to the surface. You kind of do figure out, oh, that's where it might have started. And not started, but kick started. Because remember what I said, a shadow is something, a pattern is something you're born with. Um,
mhm,
they can be amplified because of an event. But if you are carrying something that's been genetically coded in you since birth, you're not going to get to the root cause of it. But the aim here is to not necessarily get to the root cause of the pattern, but just to be aware that such a pattern is playing in your subconscious in the first place. Because imagine how you use this as a tool, as your own, I don't want to say weapon, but as your own magical staff, for example, or a wand. If I know that if every time I eat something spicy, I want a sweet, then I'm going to pay attention to the level of spice of food I'm going to eat the next time so as to not crave the sweet because I may be diabetic. I'm just giving you a loose example.
Mhm.
So if you think that you always fall in love as soon as you get out of a relationship, and then that love happens to be a certain kind of a way, then you might think, maybe this time when I get out of a relationship, I'm not going to immediately fall in love because I recognize the pattern. I'm going to take some time out to myself. The pattern recognition helps you understand not necessarily what was the root cause of it, but how can I use it to my advantage so that I don't find myself in that situation again? I can not feel stuck, and I can feel empowered by it.
Mhm. That's amazing. A while ago, you were talking about journaling and maybe recording
Mhm.
your voice. So, those are very effective tools, I find, because it's something that I use, especially journaling. But are
Yeah.
there other tools that one may use? I'm going to pull up a comment from
Yeah.
Barbara Hartlove, who says, I find I have to be aware of my stored trauma in the body when working on my shadow. My asthma might act up, and I have to concentrate on my breathing. So,
Yeah.
is it also like
So
bodily awareness?
yes. And this brings me back to that communication that I was talking about.
Hmm.
A lot of times people talk about the mind, but the mind is everywhere. Our body has a mind of its own. Our gut has a mind of its own. What what stays in our brains are thoughts and memories of the events of how they played from visions, like from a point of view of how we envision it because of our occipital lobe, or how we hear things when someone says it to us. But people don't often think that when someone said something to us, or when I witness something with my eyes, the body goes through physiological changes. The body is like, you watch something really scary. It's not just the image that gets stored in your brain, it's the physiological palpitation of the heart, the blood rushing through your veins and everything, the adrenaline coursing, the cortisol, your stress hormone increasing in the body. All this happens in the body too, and as a result of that happening, the body goes into a state of stuckness. And physiologically, that manifests in so many different ways. Your hips can shut down, where a lot of people talk about trauma stored in the hips, and it affects the way they walk. People hunch their backs and start walking with a very, folded, bent fetal state. And that happens because psychological trauma, in terms of how they don't feel safe opening up their chest and walking, you can tell that from their posture. So body is a huge vessel that stores all of this information and manifests as issues with joints, issues like inflammation, issues like autoimmune diseases, gut health. It's endless. So yes, if you have to let the trauma resurface, it's not that you're letting the trauma resurface like I was talking about. It is the trapped emotion because your body didn't know, or you didn't allow it to process that emotion fully for whatever reason. And I'm not saying this, you were aware of it at the time. Nobody consciously holds an emotion inside. But for whatever reason, maybe you were not taught how to process emotions because you were constantly said, you know, grow a pair. So what? Dust it off, pick up and walk, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah.
But we don't do that. And so the body traps it, or the body doesn't process it That's what's called dysregulation. And that's how it affects. So when we talk about, when Barbara's talking about the stored trauma in the body is actually the trapped emotion. And when we do things like tremors, we induce intentional tremors in our hands and legs,
Like
you'll see
shaking.
after some time, oh, it's not this intentional shaking as in you can, yes, let loose and shake, but one of the very common things I do myself and I have people do is if you were to lay flat on the floor
Mhm.
and you leave your hands by your sides, bend your knees and let your feet touch together, but your knees can either stay opened and you slowly start bringing your knees together, or you can do it the reverse way. Your knees are touching together and you slowly start opening up your hips. At a certain point, your thighs, your limbs will just shake uncontrollably because that's the stored trauma trying to come out. And the reason why we do that is because we're holding it in tension. And when you let loose, it's allowing literally the memory of the cells in the muscles, in the bones, in the vessels is being allowed to let go of that emotion. So it comes out in the form of intentional tremors and shakes. We call it intentional not because we are intentionally shaking it, but it's intentional because I'm intentionally allowing my body to let go of it and process it. So,
That's beautiful. Bernadette, the
yeah,
series saying everyone should read The Body Keeps the Score.
absolutely.
Yeah. It talks more
Absolutely.
about
One of my favorite books.
yeah, about stored trauma in the body. And we have a few contributions from the chat who they hear from other people, like Mangle Unicorn saying, "My mom's greatest hit." Are you on the rack? And Taro Stash Gerald is
Yes.
hearing "Boys Don't Cry." Yeah, it's this
I have two
comments.
boys.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have two boys. One is a 6-year-old, and ever since he was a 2-year-old, um, and I tell him this, that this should be his remark back when he hears "boys don't cry," um, is that if I'm in pain, would you like me to laugh?
Oh,
Because I'm human, you know. And suddenly people are just like, no, but you can't tell a child not to feel pain then, right? If you're in pain, you do what your body has to do. It 99.9% of the time, it is cry when you're in pain, not laugh or jump with joy or be surprised. Yes, there is an element of shock or whatever, based on how it happened. Or the other one is toughen up and do what? you know so I often tell my 6-year-old, because until they're 7 they absorb everything, and then after they're 7 that becomes their truth. That's eventually how they live the rest of their lives. So I ingrain in him all the time that it doesn't matter who you are. If you're in pain, you're allowed to cry as long as you want to cry. It's why we help regulate children, why we tell people breathe, is when that crying gets the better of them and they get dysregulated. Crying in pain is not called dysregulation. Going into panic attack as a result of crying becomes dysregulation. So if you got hurt, it hurts. I'm going to cry, depending on the intensity of my pain, right? So these, again, it's the language, right? It's the language, it's these
yeah,
words that shape the humans. And so they decide, my belief is I'm a boy and I shouldn't cry. So I'm going to hold it all in. And you hold it all in, but your body and the brain pays the price.
yeah, exactly.
I
Like
love the comments though. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
true.
yeah. Um, Barbara Hartlove is saying, I did a workshop where they were going to being enough. I howled uncontrollably, shook, and to release it. I think it's
Yeah,
part of that. Yeah.
yeah.
And
You'd be surprised. Is that similar to a runner's high where they break down the muscle and experience past memories? Um, it's putting them through. So people often, again, like they fear the word shadow, people are now starting to be averse of the word stress. But there are two kinds of stress. Not having to put a label on good stress and bad stress, but let me use those terms to explain. We all have to put a certain amount of put our body in a certain amount of stress state, which is called hormesis. You have to be in a certain state of a little bit of stress, which we call discomfort, in order to get a result. Because if you're comfortable all the time, you're not going to go anywhere, right? So when you go to the gym and you lift, say, you can lift a 5 kg dumbbell, and you feel like, oh, I can lift this anything, I don't feel any fatigue. Well, that means you're not putting enough stress on your muscles. You need to pick a heavier weight. So when you pick up heavier weight, you are now putting your muscles and your bones and connective tissues under a bit of stress in order to gain better, bulkier, whatever the outcome is that you're after. So that's the kind of stress that we want. The other kind of stress is the one that raises the cortisol, which may or may not be in your control, which is why we talk about emotional health and mental health. It's the kind of stress where initially it started as I'm stressed out, I have a lot of work, and you feel the effects of it. But if you do nothing about it, it becomes your default. You live in a stressed state, and that then has detrimental outcomes on your health, mental health, physical health. So yes, it is the same, because when runners do that and the lactic acid and all of that breaks down, sometimes they would sit there and have the tremors. That tremors isn't necessarily releasing trauma. That's just muscles being overworked, and then they shake. Because if you go to the gym and you haven't been going to the gym and picking weights, and you go to the gym one fine day and you overdo it, when you sit, you'll have tremors because you've done something, like given a shock to your body. But that isn't necessarily, it's the same principle, but the outcome or the intention of that isn't the same as wanting to release the trauma. So yeah.
Interesting. So right now we are like seeing a picture what happens to like our physical body, our emotions, when we don't heal our shadow when we don't do shadow work. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, what would happen if we do shadow work and we heal our shadows? What does healing look like?
So healing, I wouldn't say is healing of the shadow work,
Mhm.
but it's more healing our conscious aspect. One of the things we need to understand is that subconscious patterns are at a subconscious level. The patterns are embedded at a subconscious level. When we're trying to do the shadow work, what we're essentially meaning is that that subconscious, unaware, not knowing what's behind us, is being brought to the conscious level. So I'm trying to take my eyes and put it at the back of my head to constantly keep seeing what it is that I'm seeing, right? And then how can I best use that? Can I change the back of me? No, but I would like to know what's going on. So shadow work is bringing those patterns, which I was not aware of, to my subconscious, so that now when I go into work and I feel every time, for example, I'm in a meeting, and I'm going to give you my client's example as me, because this is what she was going through. She would say, Pam, every time I'm in a meeting, I would have 10 people talking. And when 10 people talk, I try to talk, someone talks over me, I never get heard. And because I never get heard, I feel like I have never contributed. And then in my review, people say I don't contribute. And that then has a snowball effect on my bonus. I never get a bonus. And because I don't get a bonus, I put in the hard work, but I don't get validated. And because I don't get validated, I'm not happy in my job. So you see how this all spirals and gets connected. So we sat down and we said, okay, so it all looks like it stems from the fact that you're speaking and people talk over you. Why do you think that is? And she said, well, maybe it's because I don't stop people. I don't stop people and tell them I'm still talking. I said that could be one thing, but what about the tone and the voice? Do you take command and let people know you are talking, or do you speak very softly, make a comment in the middle, and someone doesn't pay attention? And it was a couple of those things. So we sat with it. I didn't say anything. I let her sit with it. And then she said, maybe it's because when I was growing up and my mom and dad would talk and I had something to say, I wasn't allowed to voice an opinion because it was considered talking back. And we said, oh, that's coming from somewhere. Okay. So she came up with that insight. So because she was told that talking and voicing and having an opinion is like talking back, she carried that into her workplace. So she lacked the confidence of being able to be vocal and place her opinion, and allowed people to let them talk over her, because if there's someone who didn't want to be cut off, they would make it known that they were still talking. I was still talking, excuse me, I haven't finished, something like that. But she didn't, very consciously, because somewhere in the back of her head, her parents' voice kept ringing. Don't speak. Your opinions don't matter. You're talking back. No one cares. Whatever it is. These are her words. And so we went back again to not trying to understand what is the root cause, because like I said, you're born with subconscious patterns, right? It came down to the fact that she would see her mom and dad have that same kind of dynamic where the dad had the ultimate voice in the family, and the mom, if she had a bit of a rebuttal, they had to keep quiet and then go on about their day. The mom was not allowed to voice her opinion, because if she did, then she isn't obeying the man of the house, and he would just cut them off of financial supplies or whatever the story was. So we worked a bit on that, and now what happens is that she comes to the understanding. She hasn't erased that pattern, but after a lot of work, she came to the recognition that I am bound to do this. I recognize it. So the next time she's at the meeting, she went back to her default way of speaking. And then when someone spoke over her, she recognized, oh, this is happening again. I'm going to now do something about it. That's how it works. You don't erase the pattern is there. And you now recognize it, and because you recognize it, you want to do something about it, and that's the doing. What can I do because I recognize this pattern? That's the most important part of, how do you change the way you're living now when you're doing shadow work. So I hope that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, I mean, it's useful to go back and useful. I don't see this. I don't know how useful it is to go back and look at the root. I think if it arises
Yes.
naturally from your work, that's one thing. But to go back and I'm just speaking for myself, it's interesting in an intellectual kind of a way to put a puzzle together for me.
Mm.
That's how I feel about it. But in terms of what I have to do and what needs to happen, it still comes down to the same thing, is awareness and then changing my behavior. It doesn't even matter if I change my beliefs, because I think my beliefs will change over time as my behavior does.
Absolutely.
Sometimes
some people do need to change the belief before the behavior, only because holding on to that belief doesn't want that behavior change to happen. It becomes like a cognitive dissonance for them. It's like, I believe this thing, but I'm doing this thing, and the two things don't fit together. So eventually there'll either be a relapse, or they'll fall off the wagon, or they'll just end up saying, oh, this is not for me. Okay, I'll just stick to my old ways. So sometimes it does work to change the belief, but more often than not, what you've mentioned, and this is how it naturally happens to all of us. We evolve from the time we were kids to being an adult. And as we evolve, we don't sometimes realize, how did my beliefs around this change? What changed? Because I used to believe this a certain way, and over a period of time, something just changed. But those are those natural ways of changing beliefs. But when it comes to our shadows or our inner patterns, it's often this conscious wanting to change the belief because they're so hardwired in our brains, and that too in our subconscious, where we can't really reach unless we're in a certain brain state. So that's when it becomes a bit more like, what is the belief that is keeping me in this pattern? Why am I not able to shake off this belief? Why am I holding on to this belief so much? Where did it stem from? So, yeah.
That's a good journal prompt that I'm going to take note of later. I'm going to use it when I journal next time. So that's amazing.
Journals are great ways to do it. And one of my favorite ways to do that, I personally did, and I still continue to do, is meditation. A lot of people have different opinions about meditation, because when I dug a little, usually when I ask people, why do you not like meditation? It usually comes from assumptions they have about meditation, which are not true. And that's why, because as my mother always said, half information is dangerous information. You either are ignorantly bliss and go about your way, or get all the information about it, or want to get information about it. Because just sitting with half the information and saying, I know everything, this is how I'm going to live my life, can be quite dangerous. So meditation, I would say, is a great way to go about doing this kind of work, among other things. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so
it
let's
helps
say
you.
that.
Sorry, go
Yes,
ahead.
please. No, go ahead, Linda, please.
I was just going to say that if one of the things that meditation does that I find valuable is it helps me gain perspective. It helps me
Yes.
be more of an observer. It helps me um, observe my behavior and my interactions from a more detached point of view, so that I'm not so when I am acting and being in the world with people around me, I'm not so likely to fall into my patterns, my
Yeah. Usual default.
not so good patterns. But it's useful to me just to help me witness my life.
Absolutely.
Barbara Hartlove has a similar comment. Learning about my multidimensional self gives me a new perspective at looking at myself
Love
from a
it.
higher level.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's great.
And we're all so multidimensional, right? I mean, just imagine, we've got so many systems that, from a medical perspective, I can tell you, we have a respiratory system, we a cardiac system, a circulatory system, we have a nervous system, we have an endocrine system. We have so many systems all fit into this one, and each system feeds into one another, yet they are a system on their own. So we are multidimensional in just from a physiological, material, flesh, bones, muscles aspect. So when it comes to adding another layer of complexity, talking about energy, we talking about other different dimensions, you know we need to show ourselves so much grace, because we are here for a couple of years on this planet, and we put so much pressure on ourselves to follow a certain thing and do a certain thing, and I have to be this way and I have to be that way, not realizing that our body is subjected to so many dimensions in so many different ways. We need to allow it with compassion. We need to allow it time and space. What is it that we want our body to do? Because we wake up one day and we're like, I want my body, I want to be fit, I do not want to have diseases. Well, then are we going to change how we eat, how we live, how we walk, how we look after our mental health? We demand a lot from ourselves, but not giving ourselves that grace. And doing shadow work shows us how to be compassionate with ourselves, doing
Yeah.
that inner, it brings that level of compassion. You become so That's how I find, and that's how I'm sure, if you've
Mhm.
both gone through with your clients and done the readings for them, is that you would find people have a newfound self-respect, which is respect for one's self, because we often put ourselves on the back burner because we have an image to live up to, an image that we've created in our head about ourselves, which is a very conscious image, not a subconscious one. So, yeah.
Like I also find myself less triggered compared
Yeah.
to the past my past experiences. Like when I was younger, I recall, okay, bad service from a waiter or a staff, it really pisses me off. And now it's like, oh, why am I feeling this way after doing that work? Now it's all okay, let's chill.
Yeah. For me,
I feel like
patience was such a trigger. If I would stand in a line and I would see that someone is not doing the line so long, and, I would get so antsy. And then that's when it started. And I was like, look at the person behind me and in front of me. They're chill. They're spending time on their phone. Why am I getting antsy? And I had nowhere to go. But that kind of that triggered in me something that I need to look at, like, what's this talking about me? Where's this stemming from? Why can't I have the level of patience that this person is
that they
talking
have.
about? And then it took
Yeah.
me to, okay, my mom was always like that, on the go, go, go. And then it took me that, okay, but that's how she was, and that's how her pattern was. So that's my subconscious rewiring. So yeah, I'd love to hear about Linda.
Yeah.
What triggered you that you figured out a pattern that you
What was the
you
bump?
thought was like, I need to do some inner work.
There are hundreds.
We
Bad
all have.
bad relationships is a big one, big one, and the bonk of enlightenment. I I found myself in a pattern of um, working for, and this wasn't conscious choice on my part. Okay, um, of course not, and I don't even think it was subconscious choice either. I found myself in a pattern of working for bosses were uh, who had a lot of narcissistic behavior, people who lied, and people who manipulated, and people who were very underhanded and dishonest. And
Mm,
uh, that was really hard for me to stomach. Um, but because of the way I had been raised, a job was like marriage. You didn't just walk away from. Well, and I had 3 kids, and that, I mean, I was the breadwinner for my children, and so I stayed a lot longer than I should have in those jobs. Just like I
mm,
stayed a lot longer than I should have in relationships with similar people,
yeah,
and
yeah.
um, and the last experience with a narcissistic kind of boss was really damaging and really painful, and really really did a number on me that took quite a while to recover from, and honestly, um, it helped me a lot because I began to see the pattern, because I was in so
Mm.
much pain after the job was over, after he fired me.
So
uh,
that was your work and love type of
yes,
relationships
yeah,
calling on, and you kept ignoring that and ignoring that,
yeah,
and then it got to a
yes,
point where a big catastrophic event had
yes,
to happen
yeah,
for you that forced
yes,
you. Yeah, that's
yeah, yeah,
that's
and
nature's pattern.
well,
True.
yeah, it was a dangerous pattern actually. um, and
No, no, sorry. I said that's nature's pattern.
Oh,
It
nature.
knocks,
Oh,
it
I'm sorry. I thought
knocks.
you said
Yeah.
danger. Isn't
No,
that
no.
interesting? I didn't hear what you
Yeah.
said. I thought
But it is a
that
dangerous pattern too.
it
I know.
is. It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's
Yeah.
Especially
dangerous.
if it went unnoticed.
Well,
Yeah. And that's what happens. Patterns do go unnoticed
yeah,
because
you
they are
start thinking
they
all
become so
bosses are.
ingrained.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you start thinking all bosses are assholes. We all know that. And
Or because they become a boss, that's their job. That's how they
yeah,
have to be if to get
yeah,
the job, to get the
yeah,
job done.
yeah,
And
exactly.
we thought that about parents too, right? When we
Yeah,
were kids, we thought, oh, my parent has to be strict with me and shout at me and hit me, until we became parents ourselves and we decided, oh, I don't have to do that with my child. It shifts perspective.
Mhm.
I
it does.
can be a different parent to what the kind of parent I had, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
because otherwise we think that's the norm. And that's why we keep living on autopilot, because we think this is the norm. This is how I am. This is how I've always been. So this is how I'll always be, that kind of a thing. Until that norm gets challenged, either by our own triggers or by a natural external event, that's suddenly when we are like, oh, so this isn't necessarily the norm. This is one way of it happening. There are many ways of it happening, and I like that way better. How can I get that way to happen for me? That's when you go and say, so what is this pattern that keeps me getting stuck in this way, that the outcome's always like this? And so, yeah.
Yeah.
So, what
Well,
if we've come to that point that we have recognized the repeating patterns per se?
Mhm.
When is it a good time to start doing healing?
when you
I
see
would
it.
say when time is a good time when you've recognized it, because why wait, right?
Yeah.
I've I had a wound on my hand. I didn't know about it, but as soon as I saw it, I can't now ignore it. I need to fix it right now. I want to cover it up, even if it means that I'll put a temporary band-aid on it so that it doesn't keep getting brushed. So I'll do something immediately in the meantime to help me get over that hump. But it depends on the state in which you had that awareness. If what Linda is saying, something major happened, like the loss of a job, or say in a very, mental aspect, something really triggered you and shook you to the point of you having to scream and shout and get to your wits end and things like that, then it's always best to seek help, like a professional help, and do it with them. But if you've come along on this journey and gone, I always tend to get something like that. It's not something very catastrophic, but it has brought to your awareness something. And out of curiosity, you want to get to it, get to the bottom of it. And then you're like, okay, this isn't working for me. I need to make some changes. Then you could do it by yourself too. But it's when these major events call out and shake that very foundation that you thought is you, but is challenging your identity. Um, it's it's often a good thing to find a professional person and then start the journey with them, because it's it's not an easy process. It brings to surface a lot of things. If you think the event was like a tower moment that we would call, um, unearthing patterns, coming face to face with what you have been living with for so long. And as a result, because we often, what we do when we recognize these patterns, it's very easy to slip into guilt and shame. Oh, that's why I got into that relationship. Why didn't I see that? But that's not the time to question. But if you think that you're the kind who would do that, then you need someone who would put you back on your track to say, that's not the point of this work. The point of this work is for you to recognize why those happened and then take the lesson from it, but not slip into guilt and shame and even more. So it's you need that support and you need that someone, but in order for that to happen, you need some level of stability, mental more than physical, but usually a little bit of stability. If you are someone who is diagnosed with a mental health condition that could shake the stability, then you need to do this definitely with a professional person. If you're on certain kinds of drugs that shake or blur the stability, that's again another reason why you need to do it with someone, because it needs to be done, but it doesn't have to be forced.
Mhm.
It needs to be done with care, with support, and with guidance.
That's a good point because with someone impartial who is working with you, they can pace the work that you can do.
Because they will track Sometimes what happens is I recognized one pattern. I want to recognize all my patterns, but that's not how it works. I don't want to go inside my system and find out everything that's not working at the same time, because if you unearth a lot, you should have the capacity to be able to heal all of it. And generally, unearthing one pattern itself becomes so consuming, you do not have the bandwidth or the energy to look into others. That's why shadow work is an ongoing process. You have to do it one shadow, one pattern at a time, because it's all consuming. Because what you're essentially shifting shifts who you are as a person, it shifts your identity. You come to terms with this. Oh, I used to be a shy person, but then I realized I'm not a shy person. Now I'm working on that. It shifts who you are because you gave yourself a label. You're taking off that label. You're taking off this personality trait that you thought you are. And that's a huge thing. So you don't want to do multiple things at once. It gets overwhelming and then you'll just give up. So yeah.
Something I found in my own journey was that if I were able to make a meaningful change in one area, I found that in myself, I found that often translated it had a cascade effect. I'm not
Yes,
saying
in other areas.
in other areas as well, small ones, but
Yeah.
hey, it's all a win as far as I'm concerned. And
Yes.
I just want to share with everyone the big thing that I learned about my relationships with narcissists is that narcissists target people like us, okay, compassionate, empathetic, wanting to help, um, and boundaries, because I wasn't taught boundaries as a child. I wasn't allowed to have boundaries. You can never ever say no. And learning how to say no was a big step. Learning how to say no, this is not for me. No, this is not right. I won't do it. I just won't do it. Go ahead and fire me. And that that particular learning no, that particular change, huge effects, huge effects, positive. I
Yeah.
didn't lose any friends.
Can I just say, when you talked about it initially in terms of, and I'm sure a lot of people will wonder about the same thing, is we talk about why do we keep attracting that, right? Why do we
Mm,
attract the same thing? Nature's way of bringing to surface, if we go about our own happy way, nature's way of bringing to our surface that we are all born on this planet with subconscious patterns and we need to pay attention to our subconscious patterns. The way it comes to surface is the way in we make our choices. So imagine you are this ball of glowing energy and you're born with little holes and pockets. And then you go out, sometimes unaware of these holes and pockets, but obviously feeling the void in some of them. We don't realize that the voids need to be filled by us,
yes.
with us. We attract that to us in the form of external.
Yeah.
So this is why most, myself included, always had certain kind of relationships. I always attracted what people call themselves broken people. I don't believe people are broken because we're very complex. We're not broken. We just need healing. But the people who were with me, they would always come to me because they were a certain type. And I realized that they were a certain type because I was a certain type. I was always out to fix people, fix the broken people. So then, if I need to fix the broken people, why will the non broken people come to me? It'll be the broken people that come to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I realized that what in me wants to become the fixer.
Mm-hmm.
Then I
Mm-hmm.
realized
The
that my
hook always finds the eye, doesn't it?
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And so when I realized what about me wants to play this fixer's role,
Yeah. Yeah.
I went and did my shadow work. And guess what? I stopped attracting broken people. I don't think them broken, but this is their words. but I stopped attracting them is because the hole that I thought needed to be fixed by this round peg somewhere was actually fixed by my own round healing. And so that's an example of why we attract it, why things work for us, and why it comes to the surface. It's a way of making things work for us to bring that shadow work to the surface. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Can I slip into it? Have I erased that fixing feeling? No,
Oh, oh
but I'm
no.
aware of it.
Yes.
I'm aware of it. If I have a friend who comes to me and I sniff that they want fixing, I'm aware of it before I make a decision about how I want to get into a friendship relationship with that person now, rather than just diving nose dive into this and then trying to fix them. Because that pattern will still be there. If something major were to happen, that pattern can come and manifest itself as something else. So patterns can never be erased, but we heal the way in how we didn't know about it, but now can utilize. So that's the healing.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
we are past the top of the hour. So
Mm,
I can't imagine because it feels like we started 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I know.
I know. I
Time
know.
flies. So, Dr. Pam, if there's anything that you would like to say to anyone who's watching this video right now or this live, who might be afraid of shadow work, what would you
Yeah.
like to tell them?
I would say, firstly, let's start with the language. Call it whatever pleases your mind to allow you to give yourself the permission to even start the work. Don't want to call it work, don't want to call it shadow, call it whatever you want. Call it enlightenment, call it pattern, repatterning, anything that allows you to take that first step. Okay, I'm happy with what I am going to do or I'm about to do.
Yeah.
Now let me get to it.
Yeah.
If you want to, if you are averse to, or for financial reasons or whatever reasons you don't want to go and see an expert, and you think you have the ability to do it by yourself, because we're all smart, intelligent people. Deep down, we know ourselves. We know what we are capable of handling and what we are not. If you think you can do that by yourself, please read good resources, scientific resources, speak to spiritual people who really know what they're talking about, because there's a lot of garbage out there and you don't want to read the wrong kind of stuff and do the wrong kind of things. You can't go wrong with meditation. You can't go wrong with journaling. You can't go wrong with trauma informed practices that are available online. You can't go wrong with these. However, if you believe that you really need to do this work, but you are questioning your capability, then do find help. If you can't afford the help, find a trusted friend or a relative, someone you trust who can be there for you, someone whose judgment is sound and unbiased so that they don't point fingers at you and go, oh, that's why it explains why you behave like that. Not that kind of language. And know that once you start this journey, it brings to surface some things that you may not like, but definitely want. It's like going to a dentist afraid to find a decayed tooth. But the joy of doing it, knowing that it's taken care of, and all I have to do is maintain the hygiene of my mouth by regularly visiting them and regularly looking after myself. It's that kind of a hesitation. It's a wonderful journey, but it's a never-ending journey, because life's circumstances brings us to a point where we need to either revisit the same pattern or unearth another pattern. And if being afraid of doing this work itself is a pattern, I don't want to change, start there. Why do I not want to change? That's a good starting point.
Thank you, Dr. Pam. And Gerald has a very helpful comment as usual. He's saying reframing and rewiring are perfect for me, which is what you were talking about labels. Work with the labels or the wording that you are most comfortable with. And he's saying, I'm sure I'll discover more when I start reading Cracking the Happiness Code. This also ties in with
I
what you were
know.
talking about resources. So, if anyone doesn't know it yet, Cracking the Happiness Code is Dr. Pam's book. That's just, uh, I'm going to put up the image of what it looks like. It's available on Amazon, and the link, I believe, is in the description. Okay, there you go.
I finished the introduction last night.
Oh,
Awesome. I've on purpose kept them very short. The chapters are like very short, just because the human attention span is not more than 8 minutes. So each chapter should be around then. So and then you throw in some ADHD, and then it's just like, where did that go?
there we go.
But yeah. Hmm.
So this is the book Cracking the Happiness Code. Again, everyone, if you haven't read it yet, the links are in the description. Please do check them out. And Dr. Pam, where can people find you after this show?
I'm working, I have a website, which I'm sure you've put in the show notes, and I'm working on an app which I will come up with very soon. It's in the testing phase. However, I've got an Instagram account. I must say I've been a little slack on that at the moment with my hay fever and my cold, but I will be back during the holidays. I do have a YouTube channel too, and that has been dedicated for a different kind of work. But in the new year, I'm going to reignite stuff, and there will be more for us to watch and interact, and hopefully have the two of you and Gerald and Diana as guests on my show. So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we love that.
Yeah.
We're very much excited for the app, especially.
Yeah.
Oh,
If you need like any beta testers.
Yes,
absolutely. You guys are on
we
my
can.
list.
Yes, we are your guinea
Yeah.
pigs.
Wanda too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I should have that as like an alert when they get a notification. Just a squawk.
We should make one.
I will do
So
that.
how about you, Linda? What are you up to? What's coming up for you in the next days?
Well, tomorrow I'm going to be on with, sorry, tomorrow I'm going to be on with Deborah Zaka. I'm just trying to get back into my person voice, I guess, my professional voice. That's what I was looking for. I'm going to be on with Deborah Zakow, and we are, this is on Wings of Insight, and we're going to be talking, sorry, we're going to be talking about the lesson I'm being asked to learn,
Whoa,
which
that's a
covers
cool
many of
topic.
the same things that we're discussing today. Is, what's in front of us that we need to look at, and how can we approach it consciously. So yes, now I need to check my book and see what else, because oh look, I don't have anything else until Monday at 2, and then, excuse me while I put on my X-ray vision glasses. Monday at 2 o'clock Pacific, Gerald and Diane and I are going to be doing the Joy Show again.
Yes.
Nice.
And then Tuesday, Akashic Adventures, 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern, is Akashic Adventures, and Gerald will be our guest. Diana is not going to be with us on Tuesday. So that's what's coming up for me.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
What
looking
about you,
forward to
Diane?
that. For me, I will be the next time I will be back on is with Linda and Gerald for the Joy Show,
Mhm.
and then I'm taking a
Mhm.
short break from doing many
As you should.
live streams. Yes,
Yeah, I'm kind of
holiday.
taking it easy over the holidays as well.
Yeah.
I'm still going to do Akashic Adventures and into the, well, not into the ether, I guess, because you're not going to be there, but um, Wings of Insight. But I'm kind of ramping back. Also, I just started a part-time job, so
Yeah. And
that's
to everyone who's watching, thank you so much for being here. And we hope that you have a wonderful holidays upcoming.
Yes.
And yeah, please do check our channels out. Again, everything is in the show notes or in the description. So we hope that you have a great week ahead and a great holidays ahead. See you and bye.